been looking at the comments you guys are leaving into my videos about retiring and do you have enough and what are you going to do and how are you going to make it, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a couple of things that have made me stop and think. And it may actually be that $1,000,000 idea. You guys take this, run with it. I would be interested if this was out there. I've read a couple of comments later where somebody is at age, say 62, and they're going to have to work until age 75. They've sold their house. They've only got a couple of small retirement accounts that aren't really producing much because of the vehicle, the type of account they put them into. They're living with their kids, and it's just roommate hell. I get it. I remember way back in the early days, the beginnings of the life outside of my home, where roommate situations, you learned a lot. There's a saying on this in this planet that you don't always know what you want, but you live long enough, you figure out what you don't want, and that reveals what you do want. In roommate situations back in the day, taught me a lot about cohabitating outside my family, and then also what I would and would not tolerate. So it taught me boundaries and limitations. Leave down in the comments some of your roommate experiences from way back then. Did you have to mark on the orange juice, or could you even afford orange juice? Personally, I could not. But oh my goodness, if it was a Friday night, and the drinking age in the South back in the day was 18 for beer and wine, and you would run out with whatever you had left before payday, and you'd stock up for the weekend. Yeah, you had money for that, but not orange juice. We made interesting choices, maybe questionable choices back in the day. But I'm hearing multiple stories of that same vintage and genre, that they can't afford to keep their houses. They can't afford to live by themselves. They've been divorced late in life and they got the house, but they can't afford it on a retirement income. Over and over. And we've all heard these stories. We've heard them on the internet. We've heard them on the news, TikTok, shorts, whatever. We've all heard it. We know people like this. So let's take a walk back in time. And it was probably, in my mind's eye, when I see it, it was the turn of the century. It was the 20s, the 30s, especially where those rebellious women wanted the rights to vote and to work outside the house, etc., and chose not to marry and not to have kids. You know, my tribe, my ancestors. Well, I did eventually marry, but it was late, and then I was single for a long time, and then I married for love again. But no kids, okay? Dogs. I don't have fur babies. I know some of you do, but I have dogs and I have cats, and currently I have everybody else's dogs and cats because I travel too much to actually house my own. But soon, very soon, as I introduce you to my next pack, you will know that I finally pulled the trigger, stuck the fork in it, bam, and she's done. She has stepped away from working outside the house. She is now her own boss yet again. So like, share, subscribe. Keep coming back. Binge my videos. Help me achieve that next goal and get my pack. That's the goal. It's not to leave this job. It's not to monetize and etc. It's, I want to live my life on my terms. That's what I want to do. Okay, so back to what I'm bringing to you guys as your $1,000,000 idea. So back in the 20s, 30s, etc., when you chose not to marry and life was completely 100% your responsibility, when you got to your end of your work career and you didn't have a home per se, etc., there were retirement locations, boarding houses. Well, there were boarding houses throughout that time for women only, safe, no men, because it was very taboo to have the inner living conditions of genders that were outside of matrimony. Go and watch any of the black and white movies. You know, they on the movies, you had to sleep in separate beds. That's how, we'll say, restrictive our moral culture was back in the day. Not to say everything was wrong with that, just saying it's very different today. But when I first started going up to New England to visit the man who I now get the honor to call my husband, I was exposed to a completely different culture, etc. There were apartment buildings that were for retired women only. And these apartment buildings were old 1930, 1940 mansions that had been converted to triplexes, etc. There were group homes for women. Now, fast forward to today where we've got Airbnbs, we've got all sorts of apps and commercial entities that will help you find a roommate, etc., etc. Why don't we bring that back? Why don't we do it for, and it doesn't have to be just women, okay? Because we could have the married couples, etc. But I see this as when my husband and I are retired together and we want to travel, how great would it be to rent a suite or a room in an Airbnb that was just for people our age in our situation that needed it long term or for the weekend, for a couple of weeks, doing a long term vacation somewhere and having it as home base, living like a local. But for all of us that have left comments or are concerned that you would not be able to continue living independently outside of a senior community because the price of those are a bit prohibitive for the majority of us, I agree. But why not take the house you got that you raised your 4 or 5 kids in and you've still got multiple bedrooms and multiple baths and open it up as a selective, you hand select who you want to live with, but then we live together as folks of the same generational context, because that would definitely make us, I would assume from my own experiences as roommates, it would give us points of reference, commonalities, shared histories, if it was nothing more than just the decades we lived through, etc. But it would definitely help out with the cost of home ownership, which includes everything from maintenance to taxes to insurance, etc., the utilities, reduce the individual cost of living somewhere for everybody. It would give them individual apartment suites, and that could just be, a lot of the houses have been built with the shared bathroom situation for 2 kids or a master suite, a master bedroom with an ensuite, or 3 or 4 bedrooms with a singular bathroom down the hall. It could work. So for those of you who may be struggling with this particular issue as you look toward your next chapter in the uncertainty, consider that. Now, with home ownership and with this, you'll definitely want to check with your insurance company for, roommates, et cetera, et cetera. See what that covers. Don't go diving into this blindly without double checking all that. Make sure there's no restrictions from your local government as far as the number of heads you can rent before you're considered a boarding house in a business. But even so, if it was a business in your area, look into that. That might be your side hustle or one of your side hustles. I would imagine having 1 or 2 roommates, however, would not necessarily make it a commercial enterprise, and that would not be any of their daggum business. All right, so that was something I wanted to get out there as the next $1 million idea for somebody to run with. If you start this up, leave down in the comments and let us know where you are, especially if you have the occasional room to rent out for me when I travel, especially because I'll be traveling with a dog or 2 at the time. Anyway, I'm Jenny. I post on Wednesdays and Saturdays these jigger gems and these brilliant moments I want to share with y'all as quickly as I can. Like, subscribe, comment, come back. We're building an incredible community. Let us know what your next step is. Stop recording.